Welcome to another episode of What's on Your Mind. I'm your host, Nimade Bewu, or That African Butterfly. Now, if you're watching live, you know that we are on a completely different day and time. We were on Thursday, we've moved to Sundays. I hope that you'll still watch with us. We're going to be Sundays at 7:30 from now on. The truth is, I'm taking kickboxing. Last time we talked about health and wellness and some of the things I had gone through my health stuff. And so I've moved that to my priority focus, which means shifting work things around my health schedule instead of what I've always done, which is shift my health schedule around work. So I'm taking a kickboxing class on Thursday. So now we're going to do this on Sunday. So I hope you will stick with us and join us for these awesome chats. Today is actually the first day of Hispanic Heritage Month. So I'm super excited about my guests today. I have Noah and Jalissa with me. Hello to both of you.
Hola, thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Now you're both licensed social workers, but I'd like you to introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about you. I'll actually have Jalissa go first, ladies first, and then
Okay,
go with to Noah.
thank you. Jalissa Coriano, I'm a clinical social worker and sexuality therapist here in the amazing state of Delaware. I center my clinical focus around the Latino community, particularly undocumented individuals who happen to be victims of crime, and the LGBT community and victims of human trafficking.
Perfect. My name is Noah. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker practicing in Delaware. And I primarily work with the transgender community. I would say like 99% of my work focuses with that community.
Yeah.
Well,
And so
thank you.
Noah and I are the founders of two organizations, Orgullo Delaware, which is a clinical space to support LGBT identified Latinas. And under that organization, we have just a ton of amazing initiatives, which Noah can tell you about. And then we also are the founders of the Delaware Sexuality and Gender Collective, which statewide helps to serve professionals such as ourselves, be up to date on trainings, education, events, anything that's happening in the world of sexuality, reproductive health, intimate partner violence, education. So we kind of are a hub for all of those to come together and share information.
And that's great. I love the work that you do. So I'm so happy to talk about it more and highlight it.
Yeah,
As
thank
I
you.
mentioned before, it's the kickoff of Hispanic Heritage Month. So I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about mental health in the Latino community. Actually, let me back it up and ask a question first. Is there a preference in how the community is addressed? Is it Latinx? Because I've been seeing that around. Is it still okay to say Latino community? Is it the Hispanic community? What's the best way?
That's always so tricky, and it depends on who you ask, right? So if you ask me, I would say I'm Puerto Riqueña because I am native to Puerto Rico. Usually, that's how we identify ourselves. It's like, oh, you're Mexicana, oh, you're Guatemalteca. That the term Latinx and Latine kind of comes from like the ivory tower of universities, right? That created these terms to kind of help in identifying, but we actually prefer to be identified by our own country. But sometimes that's very not possible to know which country somebody is from unless you ask them directly. But as a group, I interchange between Latino, Latina, depending on my group, and Latine, Latinx. I use all of them. So.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I will even speak for myself. I used to use Latinx a lot. I think it was for a while kind of like the go-to gender neutral term.
Mhm.
For a lot of people, it felt really good. For a lot of people, there was a ton of pushback on that term, right? Really about how it's essentially just like putting English letters into a Spanish term. And so we've kind of switched to Latine, which is also neutral. It's not ending in an O, ending in an A. And it's a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but maybe more natural to say when you're speaking, and it doesn't like sound it doesn't sound like such an academic term. And so I feel like I usually use that, and I think that's landing a little bit better with people now. I don't know if you've noticed that either.
Yeah. I appreciate the attempt. I really appreciate the thought of having something gender neutral because our language is so gendered. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know for myself, I really dislike it when I'm with a group of my girls and they say, hi, guys, or they refer to us as guys. I really do not like that, right? And so I appreciate gender neutral language, like folks, friends, customers, whatever the case is. I really appreciate that. So I appreciate the attempt of trying to make it as neutral as possible for our language.
And that's so good to know, because I'm guilty of a hi guys. I call everyone I'm a guys. But for me, I guess in my mind, that's more gender neutral, even though I can see how obviously guys is not gender neutral. That's actually men. So I will make a note of that to myself to work on. I do like saying y'all, even though I'm not from the South.
No, y'all is great. That's a great gender neutral term, y'all.
Now, speaking of mental health, your identity plays such a huge part in your mental health. Noah, you are very, I would say, I think the right term is like white passing. Like if I look at you, I would say that I wouldn't, like, you don't scream Latino to me, right? And so I have a friend who's Puerto Rican, she's blonde hair, blue eyed, and it's plagued her whole life because people think that she's not, and she is. Has that played a role in your mental health, and do you get pushback from people ever when you try to identify?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think I get that comment often, and my immediate response is like, well, what does a Puerto Rican look like, right? And how do you define what Latino or Latinx looks like? We look like everybody. We have all different skin tones, all different hair types, all different eye colors. I feel like when I'm in Puerto Rico, people assume that I'm Puerto Rican and speak to me in Spanish, and that feels really good. But I think that assumption is really difficult to form a sense of community, right? And so it feels like you're almost defending yourself and your identity and your heritage all the time, and having to prove that you're like Puerto Rican enough, whatever that means, right? That's also like an arbitrary thing. But I think for a lot of people, that if I look a certain way, if I don't look convincing enough, then I have to fight for that. If I look too convincing, then I have to fight for that. And there are, stereotypes and assumptions really in either way. And I think people kind of get like stuck in a box of what something's supposed to look like, or how you're supposed to speak, or how you're supposed to act, or how you're supposed to feel. And it definitely plays into mental health. It definitely plays into your ability to form community, which also impacts your mental health and really increases depression. And yeah, I would say that that's like such a common experience for people that I talk to, people that I work with, and often for myself too.
So how have you, is it something that you journeyed through to getting to a place of acceptance? And I'm kind of wondering how you did that. Because like with me, I obviously, like, I look like I'm black, so I'm black. But the minute I open my mouth, I've always gotten like, you're an Oreo, you talk so white, you're all of this. And it really took a while for me to like accept and be like okay with that, and say like, there isn't just one way to be black. Like, we're not a monolith. So I don't talk white, I talk like me. And it's actually quite insulting to say that because someone speaks a certain way, it's like that is whiteness versus like other ways. But like, it was definitely a journey for me to get accepting of that and be okay with that. Like, did you have to go on a similar journey, and like, how did you work through that?
Definitely. I think I grew up going to a predominantly white school, and in college went to a predominantly white university. And then in grad school, I would say it was like way more diverse. I've always kind of been in social work programs, and in college and grad school, I was also the only boy in any of my programs, which was pretty interesting. And so I think I kind of, being around a lot of white people, had to make sure that people knew who I was. Like, it was easy for people to kind of make assumptions based on what they thought they knew, or based on how they thought that I looked. And I was really self-conscious about that. And I don't know what switched. Something switched in grad school. Maybe I just like had more Puerto Rican people around me, which felt great. I had a couple of really great friends in grad school that were all Latinas and were amazing. And I think something just switched where I know who I am, whether it's, related to my heritage, whether it's related to my gender, whether it's related to like, my education. I don't really care what other people think or assume, right? Like, if I show up into a space, I'm bringing my authentic self to that space every time. Whatever people think is fine, whatever they think they know about me, like, I'm happy to challenge that. But it doesn't feel like hurtful anymore. It's just kind of funny. I think, recently we're at an event. My mom and I were at like a Pride event in June, And this lady, like unprompted, walked up to me and was like, "Oh, like you don't look like you should be part of this organization." I was like, "Number one, who are you? That is so wild to say to somebody." And just the immediate response of like, well, like I don't really know what you think that I'm supposed to look like, but here I am, and I'm happy to talk to you about the work that I do. And it just kind of becomes silly once you have that sense of self. And so I'm in a much more confident space, and I think just kind of getting more involved in my community and being intentional in that way has really helped foster that.
Mm. Yeah, I would definitely imagine that. So I'm glad that you got to that place and that you can have other people see that and hopefully they can emulate it as well. And when we talk about the Latin community, like just going back to the question that I started with and then veered off was mental health in the Latin community. Like we talk about stereotypes and stigmas and things. What are some like really like prevalent ones that you've noticed within your communities, and how have been some ways that I know you two especially have worked to try to overcome some of those?
I think that's one of a big one that you just mentioned about like you don't look like, right? And so we have a lot of first generation people, second generation people who don't know Spanish or don't know Spanish as well. And I think they're called what? No, the no sabo kids is what the term is that they're going around saying, which is really hurtful because they're trying to figure out how they fit into this world, right? This country of America, while still trying to hold on to their Latinidad, right? And so I'll speak real quick to Noah. Noah's always been very connected to his culture, to Puerto Rico. It's for those that don't know, Noah is my son. That is my baby. And so when he was born, people used to ask me, like, whose baby is this? Because he was very white with green eyes, blue eyes, and red hair. And you probably can't tell, but I'm pretty dark with a red tone to me. So I'm very Taína from Puerto Rico. And I would say, this is my baby. Where do you think I would get a baby from? But nobody would ever believe it. And it's so weird because it happened like last year. I was talking about Noah and somebody said, oh, Noah doesn't look Latino. I'm like, but that's my son. So he's Latino. And so it's just always so odd that here in 2024, we're still having this conversation. My abuela, blonde hair, natural blonde hair, blue eyes, very white skin, spoke no English whatsoever. And my abuelo was very dark skinned. And so we grew up thinking that's what we all look like: red hair, freckles, different skin tones, different skin colors in Puerto Rico. But I feel like that definitely impacts somebody's mental health, right? Having to prove that you are American enough in this country, and then also having to prove that you are still with your culture in Spanish speaking culture, that impacts your mental health because you don't know which direction to go. There's so much pressure. And so we look at those kind of things when we're trying to service our communities, right? Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. And so one thing I wanted to mention or ask about too is, there's a lot of different perceptions and things of different communities. And a lot of those things can also create barriers to getting help, those stereotypes. One thing that I know that I feel like Latin men are really like known for being masculine. Like, yes, men across the board, but like especially Latin men, right? And so I feel like it would create an additional barrier to getting that help. I think that throughout time, there have been other like races and ethnicities where they've gotten to soften up a little bit, where it's like, okay, yeah, they go to therapy, it's okay. But I feel like that masculinity within the Latin community is still so very strong that it creates that barrier like even harder. Is that like a correct view? And like, how do you work through that?
It is definitely correct. I have, like I was saying, the majority of my clients are victims of crime and are undocumented. So in the state of Delaware, we have an amazing program called VCAP, Victim Compensation. And so to anyone who's a victim of crime is able to get therapy for free. And so they're able to come in and see a therapist, and that is completely paid for by the state of Delaware. And I find that that's the in. They come in to process the trauma of their crime, But then we end up talking about incredible things, and we end up talking about things. Oh, this happened when I was 7 years old and I wasn't connected to my father, and this happened. And we end up doing a lot of really great healing. And so by the time they finish, I mean, they still end up coming back, but by the time they finish, they have a new respect for what therapy is. And our culture traditionally is, and we've spoken about this before because we've done your show before, and talked about this. There are cultures, the African culture, our culture, the Middle Eastern culture, certain ones that you don't put your business out there. It stays within the family. You don't talk about anything outside of the home. And that's very isolating, right? And so people are not getting help. But I'm finding that it is people who are saying, you know what? I need to speak to someone neutral about this situation. So I actually have people who are like 70 years old, never been in therapy, but are just ready to just make their peace with some things. And they think that they're going to come in and talk about one thing, and then we end up healing some other traumas that they have. And it's really beautiful. So we are seeing a shift. We really are. I think the more we normalize speaking to someone neutral is the best, because when you speak to your sister, when you speak to your brother, when you speak to a cousin, they're giving you a slanted perspective, a biased perspective. But when you speak to someone neutral, it's like, okay, this is what it is. Let's process this, and it ends up being more helpful in the long run.
Yeah.
I think it really is like all about that buy-in. That is such a great way to put that. I think
Yeah.
that strong sense of keep your business at home, keep your business private. It's all about, like, it's shame-based, right? And so you see a lot of that of like, I don't want to talk about these things that happen to me because I don't want to change how people view me. I don't want people to change how they view my family, how they view, maybe my culture as a whole, right? If you're going to someone as a therapist that's like outside of your culture. And so it really is that buy-in of like, okay, you're here for, maybe working on an immigration case. You're here for maybe processing a trauma or filing a police report. And that's like that's how we get you in the door. And then it kind of goes from there. But I see that a lot, especially working with the trans community, right? Of like, I've known this thing about myself forever and ever and ever, but I don't want my family to think anything differently of me. I don't want my family to have to deal with what the people at church are going to think, or what, their friends are going to think, or my extended family is going to think. And so I'd rather, sit with this, or I feel like I have to sit with this by myself until people die, or until I die, or, never, right? And so I think so much is so shame-based that it just gets so in the way of people really authentically living and authentically being themselves. And I think we're seeing, a shifting conversation around mental health. I think, for better or for worse, all the million BetterHelp ads or whatever that are floating around everywhere are getting people to think about therapy. And then the problem is the access to resources, right? And so in Delaware, like, how many Spanish-speaking therapists do we have? Not many. How many Spanish-speaking therapists do we have, that are at an affordable rate? Even less. How many do we have that specialize in sexuality and trauma? One, and we're looking at her, right? And so I think just like the access to the resources, once we finally can get people to the place of accepting help, it's hard to find anywhere to go, or hard to find a consistent schedule. And I mean, I'm just always so amazed at the work that my mom does of really like working 7 days a week and meeting people where they are, because the need is there. We finally have you. We want to get you in the door, and we want to make sure that you're getting the help, and we're not, putting barriers up of like, oh, sorry, I don't have an appointment that day, and then you're, never reach out again. It's just, you're kind of stuck in that cycle, right? Until we get more people that are like qualified and able to do good work to help all the people that need help.
Right. And can I just add on one thing Noah said? It's beautiful when you get someone in and we're starting to process things. And it's not only about living your authentic life, but it's being able to breathe in peace. Right? I think people don't talk about that enough. I'm constantly talking about peace, right? And putting that out to the universe, that I'm peaceful, my world is peaceful, everything aligns with peace. And so when, I recently had someone, like, I mentioned an immigration case, and it was talking of, I write immigration letters for people. And so coming in, and we go through their whole life, essentially, to write these letters. And I always have the partner come in at one point. And so I sit with the partner, and I asked one question Tell me why you cannot go back to your country. And he just started to cry. And immediately after, like maybe 5 minutes after crying so much, he said, you know what? When I was 3 years old till I was 10, I was sexually abused by my uncle.
Mhm.
Did not expect that.
Mhm.
Did not expect that whatsoever. He came in with no intentions of talking about that. He only thought he was going to give me, we have 4 kids here who were born in the United States and, talk about basic stuff. But it all came out the moment he sat in that chair. By the time he left, he was able to breathe. I saw that there was a shift in the way that he was breathing. And I'm like, all right, thank you, universe, for aligning us today, because this is what it's about. And I think if people give therapy an opportunity and stop thinking, okay, this is for crazy people. I don't really need this. I can figure this out myself. Just take a chance. Take a chance. And, the universe will align you with a really great therapist. And then you can just be able to breathe at the end. And that's where life really begins. Right? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Absolutely. And I could not agree more. I'm such an advocate of therapy because, yes, you can vent to anyone. Well, not anyone, but you can vent to your family and friends, but they don't have the tools to help you to get past some of that. Like they can say like, "Oh, I'm sorry," but like, are they teaching you how to like change your thought process and how to like identify what's true or not true? Like for me, it's truly the tools that I learned in therapy that have helped me grow more than just like getting it off my chest, especially because I'm very self-aware. Even my therapists are like, you're extremely self-aware. I know, but I need them to help me work through it. And I think sometimes people, especially people like me who are like, I get it. Like, I know this about myself. I know what I need to work on and what I don't need to work on. Like, they don't necessarily realize that you need that therapist to help give you those tools to work past certain things. Because, like you said, that authenticity, when you have that in your life, it really does bring you peace. I always say like my North Star is pointed towards peace. Like whatever I have to do and actions to make sure that things are peaceful for me, that is what I'll have to do, regardless of what it looks like to other people. And that is really hard for people in general, but I think especially people from cultures where your appearance or how you look to other people is so vitally important in that culture. And I know in the African culture, I was born in Liberia, like it's very important. I know in the Latin culture, it's very important. It's kind of like what we were saying before about you keep things at home because how you present to the world is what matters the most. That's how we're raised, like that's how it's perceived. And then you get older and you unpack and realize, no, actually, how I live my life, my day to day is what matters the most, not how it looks to you. But getting from A to B is a journey and it's work. And if you don't like take the time to really put in that work, you're never really going to get there. And for me, that's where therapists come in. They help you make that journey.
I think that's really so beautiful how you just put it. And I spend a lot of time talking to my clients about family, and they never stop to think about toxic patterns. And so when I challenge them a bit, I'm like, okay, what does this feel like? Let's think about what it feels like for you to do this for your family. They're like, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, all right, you don't have to do it. It's okay. It's okay. And like giving them the permission to give themselves permission to engage in the way that they want to with their families, friends, coworkers, whomever. It's like incredible when they reach that point. I've
Mhm.
seen just amazing changes in my clients because they become empowered through therapy. And so it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
I say that all the time to clients. I'm like, this is probably the only space in your life where I am completely on your side, right? Like, I don't have another agenda. I don't have a bias. I have no stake in this game. I don't know these other people you're talking about. I don't want to know them because they sound wild. But, like, like, I really am 100% here to help you live your best life and be your best self, right? And so it's not talking to your family. It's not even talking to your friends. I feel like a lot of times people will say, oh, I talked to my best friend about this. Your best friend's also a mess. This is like, it's the blind leading the blind, right? Like that is not a good call. But a lot of times it really is like, people, they might steer you in a certain direction because they want a certain outcome, or, they might really have a lot of their judgment clouded because they want what's best for you in their mind, or they want a certain outcome for you. And no one man, when do we ever get that space where this hour is just about you? It is not about anybody else.
I think it froze.
Oh, I think that,
Froze.
yeah, no, it froze. But he was making a really great point. I think that is just that's what it's about. This is about you and how you can live your most authentic life and be peaceful, right?
I
So,
agree. And something that he said that stood out for me also is just that, like, your family and friends, especially, kind of grow up around the same culture. And I think that we all tend to have a, well, that's just how it is. That's how it's always been done. So, like,
Mhm.
unless you're talking to someone who they themselves have worked to break the pattern, they're just going to guide you through that same pattern. So, like, if I'm the oldest daughter of the family, sacrificing myself for the family is just what's always been done. You take care of everyone else. Like, thank goodness for therapy. I learned how to say no. At first, I was like, my villain era. It's like, you're not a villain. You're just setting boundaries. Like, but it feels villainous to say no to people. And you grow up thinking that, like, certain boundaries are selfish, right? Like, we call those people, they're being selfish, but it's actually not selfish to put yourself first, because at the end of the day, like, someone is going to be at a disadvantage with most actions and things, and it doesn't always have to be you. When you put other people first, you're saying that you want, like, you're okay with you being at a disadvantage, and it's okay for that person to not be you. It's okay to put yourself first. But if you're talking to your family and friends who have always operated the same way, they're going to guide you to keep doing that same pattern. And for me, that's where therapy has been vital, because it was someone saying, like, no, it's okay to say no. It's okay to put yourself first. You're not the villain. You're not being selfish. You're practicing boundaries.
right.
And, like, just having that other voice in with the other voice, because it's not like your family and friends don't love you. They just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. And it's exhausting, isn't it? It's exhausting not only having to navigate your world, but navigate everybody else's world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I totally echo with that. I'm the oldest of my family, and we have something called marianismo. So you were talking about machismo earlier on, right? Machismo is the gender norm inside that cultural norm, where it's the woman sacrifices everything for the
Mm-hmm.
family. And
Yeah.
if your family's not okay, if they have a dirty shirt on, if they haven't eaten, if they're not doing well in school, if whatever the issue is with your family, you have failed as a mother, you have failed as a woman. And
Yep.
so it is exhausting to keep that up. And I have chosen a long time ago, well, I'm not going to do it. Everybody figure your own out.
Yep.
Like, I'm just not going to do it anymore. And I've been more peaceful than anything. And it's great. It really is. So,
I would say it takes like a minute sometimes to get past the changes that you learn in therapy, which is normal, right? Like, you have to be uncomfortable. If it's comfortable, it wouldn't be provoking change. Like, you have to
right.
get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, but, like, once you get past that, it's so beautiful. Like, the things that you learn in therapy, like that, like the things that don't upset me anymore, the way that I take in other people, the way that I don't take on other people's opinions of me, because I realize it's just a reflection of them or what they've gone through in life. And it's not necessarily, because if someone would say something about me and I'm like, that's not true. Why would you even think I would think like that or feel that way? And it would upset me. But now I'm like, well, no, actually, what you're telling me is how you think and how you feel. And you're putting that on me. So getting past those moments with therapists, like, it's so beautiful on the other side of it. Like, once you get past the uncomfortableness, you're just like, life is pretty chill. And so, like, I
Yeah.
cannot encourage people enough to seek therapy for those
Please.
reasons. Now, what you mentioned earlier was one of the barriers to people seeking therapy is finding therapists who look like them and talk like them and can really understand them, because it is hard sometimes having that. Like, how are you supposed to talk to someone about all the things that we just mentioned if they have no clue about that culture, right? So I love that you guys started your collective as well as your organization. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that and how you help to serve the community with that?
Sure. We basically had no choice but to start them because, Noah has always said that wherever there's a need, we've always identified, wherever we've identified a need, we identify the action that goes with it. It's never been an option for us just be like, oh, it's somebody else's problem. Let them figure it out. No, we had no choice but to start this. We were noticing that there were so many gaps in services, not only the language barrier, but just the cultural response. And, we had to move forward with creating organizations that were going to support our communities. So Noah can tell you more about the work that we do with
Yeah,
those.
absolutely. We have a ton of initiatives, like we kind of mentioned in the beginning. So we offer, clinical resources. We offer therapy. We offer trainings to organizations, and so it's kind of working to meet that cultural responsive need. So we've done trainings for doctors' offices, hospitals, government organizations, things like that are noticing we don't know what we don't know, and we're really figuring out we're not creating a space for people to like really grow and thrive. And so we've been able to do some trainings to get people up to speed, which is really fun. But then also just in terms of like people facing stuff, we do social events. So we have a movie night coming up in October, which is going to be really, really great. And there's going to be a panel around that. We are doing like a community clothing closet. And that's coming up on the 28th at the Route 9 Library. I'd love everyone to come out, donate clothing, swap some clothing. And that's primarily for like the queer and trans community to have access to clothes that feel good, right? Like it is so hard to find clothes that fit well, that feel good, that are affordable, that you feel safe buying, that you're able to go out and buy and bring home, right? And so this is just creating a space of, I need clothes that feel good for me. And then for people, on the other end of like, I'm getting rid of clothes that do not feel good for me anymore. And we're able to kind of have an exchange, which is great. We are offering kind of facilitation for pro bono legal services for people that are working through name change stuff or, adoption things or marriage things, and connecting with LGBT lawyers in Delaware through our initiative to make sure that people are matched with lawyers that feel good for them and that are representing their community. And then I think the last one, we're coming up with stuff all the time, so probably not the last one, but we also help facilitate meal delivery services for people that are going through gender affirming surgery. And so if you, let's just say, had top surgery, you are the primary, meal maker in your house, or if you're not, we will pair up with local restaurants, local chefs, to make sure that you and your caregiver and your family are getting the food that you need to get you through the recovery, it just feels like so good to be able to help in these direct ways. None of the work we do is abstract. I think a lot of times people form a million committees and they form, all these think tanks and things that they're going to do that'll one day help. And it's really exciting that the work that we do is like directly impacting people's lives. We're able to directly provide services, directly see, how that changes things for people. And so we're doing a lot of good work all the time, which is really exciting.
You are. And I love that about your organization. And I definitely try to amplify what you guys are doing whenever I can. You guys have great in-person and online events, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, we have the Pride Speaker Series, which I really love for so many reasons because we're educating people on topics, right? But not only that, we're having people hear these discussions and it may align with them. And so, like this month, for example, we're talking about sexual fluidity. And so, orientation. So, who you're attracted to, who you want to be with, um, how you identify with your orientation. And that resonates with people because sometimes people think, no, I have to fit into this box because of my community. I'll speak only about the Latina community. I have been told since I was little, I am going to grow up and get married and have children. And that's the only option for me. But what happens if you like are walking down the street and you see somebody and you're like, wow, that girl is amazing? And the energy is there and the vibe is there. And, that's the direction that you are choosing to go to. How do you navigate all that? And so I love the Pride Speaker Series because we talk about so many great topics and people end up writing us and saying, thank you. It kind of opened my eyes up and put words to what I've been thinking and feeling. And so that's always an incredible experience.
Yeah, and I love it because I feel like it gives people an opportunity to feel sort of seen and heard because there's something about representation. Like when you hear back your thoughts, it makes you feel better. And then also just the knowledge, because I think the biggest problem we have is a lack of knowledge. Some of it is people not knowing what they don't know. some of it is willful ignorance. So the more that we can get knowledge out there, I think the more it helps to combat some of the negativity that is out there.
Right.
Um, but speaking of negativity, and not to get political, but I feel like more and more lately, people feel really comfortable vocalizing their hate, vocalizing their ignorance, vocalizing negativity towards people, especially in the LGBTQIA plus community. Are you noticing an uptake in the depression and anxiety of your clients? And what are some things that you're telling them or tools that you're giving them to help sort of combat that hate that feels like it's getting louder every day?
No,
Whew,
you want to take that? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the short answer, yeah, absolutely. I think that the things that people are saying, the things that they're reading, the laws that are being passed, I think people are really being hit from all angles of not feeling socially safe, not feeling protected within their communities, worries about their healthcare being stripped, worries about access to citizenship being stripped. It's hard, right? And so, my mom and I talk a lot about like how difficult it is to be a therapist that works with a community that you're part of, because you're also experiencing the same things, right? And so, when I'm seeing laws being passed that affect my clients, a lot of times these are laws that affect me. When I'm worried about healthcare, my clients are worried about healthcare. And so it's really difficult to sit with that, right? Like process your own emotions and take care of your own mental health and make sure you're taking care of your clients. And I think a really big part of that is recognizing like you can't CBT your way out of everything, right? Like sometimes there isn't a therapeutic intervention to challenge the anxiety that you're feeling. If you're saying, I'm having a lot of political anxiety, that this is not a safe place for me anymore, it would be really irresponsible for me to say, well, let's look at, your thoughts, and let's look at, how we can kind of push back on that. And that's pretty irrational. It's not irrational. Like a lot of us are not safe for a lot of reasons, right? And I
And
think
I'm
that
sorry,
that's where we, yeah.
sorry, just to interrupt really quick. CBT, is that cognitive behavioral therapy? You
Yeah,
said you
so
can't.
sorry. Yes, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a therapeutic intervention that really looks at like your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. How do they work together, and how can we like interrupt one of them to interrupt all of them and get on a better path, right? And so it's just like a really common treatment modality. It's a lot of like exposure therapy, stuff like that. And a lot of people find it super invalidating, right? I'm like, no, I actually don't need to challenge this. This is real. And for a lot of situations like these, it is real. And so I think that that's where we kind of get into that importance of being culturally responsive and like really understanding, right? Because a lot of times you maybe you are going to like a white therapist, you are going to a cisgender therapist, and they're saying like, no, it's okay, it's going to be okay, it's not a big deal. And it's like, you have no idea how this feels, and you have no idea that it really is a big deal, and here's why. And so I think sometimes the biggest therapeutic intervention for times like now are just to like sit with it, right? And acknowledge, no, what you're feeling is so real, and how can we take care of ourselves during it? It's not to challenge it. It's not to, try and like convince you that things are different than they really are, but it's really to validate. Maybe you're not having that validation from other people. Maybe other people in your life aren't giving you that space to really be held and feel these feelings. And maybe that's what we do in our time together, is make sure like you're allowed to feel this, and how do we move forward and make sure that we're doing our best to, keep a level head every day. I don't know if you feel the same way, Mom. I know you're a lot more like solution oriented than I am.
I am solution focused, but you know what? You're absolutely right. And Noah and I exclusively and intentionally, we're intentional about the communities that we serve. So we exclusively and intentionally work with communities that are constantly marginalized. Constantly, people are debating the existence of their lives and the value of their lives, right? Whether you're undocumented, whether you're a victim of human trafficking, whether you are a trans individual, people are debating if you have the right to exist here. And so for me, it's painful because I'm a person of the universe, and I mean, Namade, you know me extremely well, and so I believe we all have a purpose here. We are put on this universe, on this earth, to do great work. And so my thing is, absolutely, there's nothing that I can say to you that's going to really decrease it, because it's not coming from me. It's coming from everybody else around me, around that person. And so we have a responsibility to really look at what we're going to contribute to in society. Am I going to be the type of person to contribute to someone having low self-esteem and depression and having thoughts about completing their life just because I I'm not really educated, but I'm just speaking with an opinion? We don't have
Mhm.
the right to do that. Do I have the right to threaten and call for the deportation of people who I say are here illegally, not knowing the extent of how immigration works? That there really is no legal way of coming into this country, and that's on purpose, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, that's the kind of things I look at. The people around who are sending the messages. We really need to work on that, because as human beings, as people of this earth, we don't have the right to do that, to contribute to that.
Mhm.
So there's not, like Noah's saying, we can process it and we can talk about it, but at the end of the day, there's not anything I can do to really decrease all of that as a therapist.
Mhm.
It's just trying to keep as positive and as safe as possible. So, and
Yeah.
that's a sad thing to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how to really say it in English. I say it translates, but me siento tan impotente, right? I feel so impotent, right? That there's not a magic thing that I can do to fix the situation. But there's
Yeah.
situations that we can't fix. We just can't.
And I think that's a very real thing. And I know that like part of my depression comes from that trigger that like this world is kind of awful and there's nothing we can do to fix it. And there's like, it's just a cycle of just bad and innocent people being hurt. Like it really upsets me. And like the one thing that I have found that combats that is really focusing on like what I can do, you know? And if you've watched this, you've heard me tell the story a million times, but there's a story about a guy who's walking on the beach and there's a bunch of seashells and he's picking them up and throwing them back in one at a time. And somebody's like, "What are you doing? Like, that's not even making a difference. Like, look at all the seashells that are still on the ground, or maybe they're starfish, whatevs. But look, they're all still on the ground." And so he picks one up and tosses it back in, and he's like, "I made a difference to that one." And so for me, I really focus on that. Like, well, I can't solve all the world's problems, and maybe things will be bad for a ton of people, but what can I do in my little space right here in Delaware or right here and wherever to help one person to feel like I've made one difference? And so I love your organization being so intentional. You're helping more than just one person, you're helping several people, but you're making that difference. And that difference is hopefully a spark that will spread, like that one person will help someone else. So you guys do so much. And I wanted to tell you thank you for all that you do. I hope you keep doing all that you do. And I hope that more people tap into everything that you have going on and the ways that you're helping the community.
Thank you. We always appreciate your support. We really do. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you again for taking the time to talk to me tonight. How can people reach out to either of you if they want more information about your organization or therapy?
So they can definitely reach out, if you don't mind, to you, and then you can pass the message on to us. But you can reach out to us at Orgullo Delaware, um, and we can put that information. Noah can put that in the chat, and we'll be able to give you more information.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll add it to the caption for everyone. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
again so much, Jalissa, Noah, and everybody who's tuned in. We had some good comments, just people watching and saying that they're enjoying the show and awesome work. No real questions, but some great comment and feedback. So thank you everybody who joined us. And again, we will be on Sunday nights at 7:30. So I hope you will come back and join us again next week.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank